hi, Jess Miriam. Huge welcome to Tales with Versatail. And you guys got a pretty epic tale to tell. So first of all, how are you both doing today?
Yeah, really good, thank you.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Good. Well, I'm really interested to talk to you both. I think a little bit more as people, I guess, aside from the boat, the ocean, the amazing challenge that you did. I'm really curious to know a little bit more about your personalities, your mindsets, kind of the traits that you've got that have helped you be as successful as you have been. So to start with, are you able to give a little bit of insight into what a couple of the key traits you have about yourselves that you think have helped shape who you are today?
I think definitely positivity, just being positive when everything's going wrong and just always knowing that there's a solution. I think that's definitely one of them that both of us have got for sure.
What about
Yeah,
yourself?
I think it's always hard to say. I think when you never really think of it in that aspect with sport, you're always looking at weaknesses and how to improve on them. So it's always weird to sort of look at the good points. But I think both really determined. When we've got a goal, we're kind of like a dog with a bone. We'll just sort of figure it out. But yeah, I think Jess is literally like the most resilient person I've met. Something goes wrong and she's just so calm in any situation.
Me too. Maybe we're both too chilled.
Yeah, maybe. Where do you think that like resilience and the drive comes from? Have you always had it, or do you think it's come from doing the challenge?
I think maybe had it a little bit, but I think because it was so difficult to get to the start of our challenge, we were just even more determined to complete it. Because we spent 2 years preparing for the Rowe alongside full-time work, and just faced so many challenges along the way.
Talk us through that then a little bit more about the prep. We were speaking a little bit beforehand about often like in sport or epic events like you guys have done, a lot of the limelight, quite rightly, is on you doing the activity itself and maybe almost crossing the finish line and kind of the end of the activity or the huge event. But tell us what actually happened going into it. What did you have to do over, 2 years before you did it?
Yeah, it's funny. In ocean rowing, everyone says the hardest part is getting to the start line, and it's definitely true.
Yeah.
So we actually met from the Atlantic rowing race, and we were entered in the same year as the race. And we actually thought it would be a bit easier doing our second row because we'd both done the Atlantic successfully. We had that experience. We had that sort of credibility to say, we've already done this. We weren't going in blind, having nothing on our adventure CV, so to speak. But it was really hard. Like it was so brutal. I don't know whether it was because there were so many things going on in the world as well. So like companies just weren't wanting to part with their money. But even just getting responses from people and then just time. So we were working full time and we were sort of hopping on sponsorship meetings in our half an hour lunch breaks or sort of going into work early to get a longer sort of meeting slot at lunch and then staying later and then driving home and getting in the gym and then up till 2 a.m. a lot of times. Sort of just writing emails or doing admin or figuring out the logistics. And it was great when we were part of the race because you have that organisation and that sort of tried and tested formula, so to speak, of how to run an ocean rowing campaign. Whereas this, it was completely independent and not part of a race or an organisation. So even just figuring out where to start from was quite hard.
Yeah, how to do it. So for people that might resonate to that then at home, if they've not necessarily maybe as big a challenge as you did, but something that's coming up that's really important to them that, like you say, you're doing all the extra work alongside something else, what advice would you give them on how to kind of cope with that and to keep pushing through and prepare well for it?
I think just knowing that it will be worth it in the end. I think the more work you put in, like the more training, the more time you spend getting to know whatever you're doing, I think you definitely will see it would just be fantastic.
Yeah, I bet. And the amount of organisation you just spoke about as well, like how did you actually go about doing that and getting yourselves ready to be able to do this amazing challenge?
Yeah, with quite a lot of difficulty. So the first thing I think was assembling a bit of a team around us.
Yeah.
We did have a lot of support from our parents. Jess's dad's rowed the Atlantic before as well, so kind of knows what's involved in it. And our parents had both supported us through our Atlantic rows. So they were a really integral part of the team. Then one of the main things that really helped us was getting a weather router on board. So just a proper expert. We don't have meteorology degrees. So Simon was absolutely fantastic, just helping us figure out the rough route and just time of year to leave from, and all those details that you need to have to be able to take to a business and package the sponsorship and at least tell them a time and a place that we're going to try and leave from.
Gosh, it sounds like so much, and it goes a bit above my head a little bit, to be honest, about, like you're saying, like all of that, I wouldn't even know where to start. But how important then do you think having that support network around you is, for people that are aspiring to do something like that? There's obviously doing it on your own once you're out there, but I think a lot of credit is due to that support network.
Yeah, I think like we needed so many people, like personal trainer, nutritionist, safety officer, and then obviously all of our family as well. And I don't know if you followed, but on day 6, our rudder snapped.
Yeah,
and
I have heard.
all of our support team basically organised the whole restart. And if we didn't have them, then we would have been stuck, and we probably would have had to wait a year. So
that's incredible. And going back to a little bit more of the prep, is how much physical rowing did you do kind of going into it? Did you end up doing? Did you kind of overtrain? Did you undertrain? Did you get the right balance going in?
It was really tricky just because of time. So actually, in an ideal world, we would have trained a lot more than we could. And I used to row at university, and actually the amount of training sessions and the volume was a little bit less. But our PT said to us at one point, we sort of felt bad that we couldn't take off every single session. And he was like, it's fine, girls, if the admin's not done and you can't get to the start line, then all this training will be wasted. So fitting it in round work and just the sheer logistics and navigating customs in Peru, especially as we got closer to departure and flying out to Peru and leaving, it just felt like we were constantly trying to figure every angle to get that extra bit of sponsorship that would allow us to fund the trip. And if you can't get to the start line, then all the training's wasted. So it was a real sort of hodgepodge of jamming all our time together and figuring out how to make all these things fit. And a lot did get sacrificed. We haven't seen a lot of family and friends in sort of 2 years, basically, because you do what you can to make it work.
And how did you cope with that kind of, I guess, maybe, I don't know if there's any pressure going into it that things weren't going to be quite ready on time. Did you feel that kind of pressure at all?
Yeah, I felt so much pressure, and we were just getting so sleep deprived as well, because we were just up later and later, just trying to do everything that we could. And in the end, the boat was on a ship on its way to Peru, and we didn't have the money to pay for the shipping. The shipping sponsor dropped out a couple of days before the boat arrived in Peru, and we just had to find the money somehow.
I think that's such a side that isn't talked about. Is like, I think, like I said, people see the event solely as the event and not everything that happens underneath. And often for a lot of high achievers, the financial side of it does come into it quite a bit. How did you lean on family and friends for like support with that? How did you kind of cope with that? 'Cause I think a lot of people can probably resonate with that a fair bit.
Yeah, it was a really stressful thing to experience, I think, wasn't it? We lent on family a little bit to try and sort of borrow bits to finish paying off the boat, and sort of promised paying them back, and just had to kind of beg, borrow and steal, chase up every sponsor payment that was due in. Our savings completely depleted. We were basically putting every spare bit of our paycheck, our monthly pay into the Rowe, and just hoping that next sponsor would come on board. And we flew out to Peru not even knowing if it was going to be possible, and just sort of hoping that a miracle would happen. And
Crazy.
And then also, like, the sponsors that we did have, we were just asking them for more as well, which was so embarrassing.
Yeah, which is awkward in itself.
It felt really bad because they'd been so kind to sponsor us, but we were just like, God, what do we do? We're so stuck.
God, that's insane. What's your why for doing it then? What was your driver? I guess you've got all this pressure going on, not sure if you're going to do it or not. What was the biggest why that you wanted to get to the start line for?
I think there's a couple of different aspects there. It's not something you can ever answer in one sentence. I think for me, at least, I absolutely love a challenge. And for my Atlantic row, when I decided to do that, it was a case of, right, I've got this decision to make. Do I do it? Do I not? And I knew that I'd regret not giving it a go when you're sort of 80 years old and you're sat in your nursing home. and because you can always give these things a go, and if you don't enjoy them, you can move on. But I didn't want to be sat there thinking, oh, I wish I'd done this.
Yeah.
And then with that, it was also, I think, a great platform to raise money and awareness for the Outward Bound Trust, which are an incredible charity that teach kids really important life skills through adventure. And when I thought how much we'd gained from adventure and how beneficial it is and how much I just even learned from my Atlantic crossing, kind of wanted to reapply that again. But also every child should have the opportunity to experience nature, adventure and nature in some form.
I absolutely love that. I think that's a really cool message to be sharing. What is it then, if you could put it into words, what is it about the adventure that you get that you think you want other people to experience as well?
I think you just learn so much about yourself. I mean, just being out in the elements in like that kind of environment, you do, especially if you're doing something as a team, you learn to communicate really well. And resilience is something that you pick up along the way too. And yeah, there's so many skills that you can get from adventure, I think.
Yeah, I think so. It's a case of kind of you learn not to sweat the small stuff as much. When you're out there, something major goes wrong, or you can't change your clothes for a week, but it's no big deal because it's just how it is. You've got to get on with it, and then you sort of get back to land, and all those sort of annoyances start to creep back in, and you kind of miss that feeling you got. And I think if everybody could kind of experience that, the world probably would be a better place in some way. Just having that challenge, working through it, and then getting on with it, and being proud of yourself at the end for it.
Yeah, I think that what you said there, just getting on with it. Do you think we've lost the art of doing that? And do you think we've potentially become too accustomed to comfort in today's world?
Yeah, definitely. That's, I mean, we're spending too much time on our phones, that's for sure. I mean, since I've been back on land, it's been so bad.
Do you think that's going to have quite a big impact on the kids of today? That kind of message of get off your phones, get out there, do incredible things like you've done.
Yeah, I think so. And there's no sort of, don't know the solution to it, because there's so much pressure and peer pressure to be on your phones, and also just the way technology is advancing for future and careers. People need to be in with technology, but it's like when we were out there, if there was a problem, we couldn't Google it very easily because we didn't always have enough power for the Starlink, and we couldn't always ring back home because we didn't want us to disturb people in the middle of the night, for example. And you do just kind of have to think on your feet. So it was great to exercise those
Doing
muscles that you don't use, because everything is so easy. You can just chat GPT how to, I don't know, fix a toilet or something, and you don't have that delayed gratification as much, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I completely relate to it, and completely agree. So going back to, you've done all this prep, you've worked hard for, how long was it? A year, 2 years going into this?
2 years,
2
about
years.
2 years.
You've done all that, you're finally in Peru. The night before you're about to, do you say set sail, set rowing? I don't know what the terminology is.
I guess set sail, but then we're like, we haven't got any sails, so I don't know what the right word,
But so you're, the night before you're about to leave, what's going through your heads? What are you kind of feeling? If there was a microphone in your head, what would we be hearing?
I think I definitely felt like there was still quite a lot to do.
Really?
I think we'd been in such a rush because we actually got to Peru 4 weeks before we were wanting to start.
Yeah.
But it took 3 weeks to get the boat through customs. So then we had such a really short period of time to get the boat ready, and everything wasn't exactly where I wanted it, and there was still I don't know, you can play around for ages making everything perfect, but just felt also relieved that we were finally, it was actually happening. Mm-hmm. Yeah, massive sense of relief.
Did you have many nerves or kind of fears or doubts or anything going into it?
I think actually not, because I kept saying to Jess, I can't wait to get out there and not talk to anybody for 6 months, because we'd had so many problems getting to the start line and had to deal with so many problems from other people as well. So we just wanted to get out there and have that peace. And I think because we'd both loved our Atlantic crossing so much, it was a big factor for us wanting to do this one, was just having the peace and chase that feeling. So we're just excited to experience that again. But adding to what Jess has said, I think you'll never feel fully ready for it. And I had the same with my Atlantic crossing. There's some things you do just end up leaving to the last minute, or finding things to do that don't really need to be doing. Jess says, you'll never feel like anything's packed right. And I think also we were in a mad rush to download a load of audiobooks and music, and we were thinking, oh God, I hope all this downloads, is it going to be enough to last me 6 months?
We didn't get an ery night, did we?
No. Was it quite a lot of chaos going on the night before? That's the kind of vibe I'm picking up.
We haven't got enough music downloaded.
Do you think that kind of chaos actually helped a little bit, or kind of doing so much that you weren't just sat in your own kind of thoughts and mind?
Yeah, I think it's quite nice to be busy, and I also feel like I don't get anything done unless I've got loads of pressure on me. I
Yeah,
save everything
nice.
to last minute anyway.
We were having this conversation the other day. I think I do need a degree of stress to
Yeah.
action some points. So I think no matter how much time we had, we would have always left something to the last minute.
Yeah.
But and did you talked about your Atlantic crossing quite a bit. What was the kind of thing that you were chasing, that feeling you mentioned about that feeling of peace out there? What had you kind of learnt from that Atlantic crossing that you were trying to put into this challenge?
Yeah, it's tricky. I think in terms of that feeling, some days you just wake up and be like, I get to be here. This is really special. And then I think for me, for what I wanted to put from the Atlantic into this one, because I'd had no experience being at sea before until I got my boat and started training for it. I felt like, if I'd have known at the end, if I'd have known what I knew now, then, I could push myself further and improve on this. But I mean, hindsight's always a wonderful thing, isn't it? So I was really looking forward to kind of applying those lessons with a little bit more experience and, I don't know, I guess a little bit more resilience to see what it would be like having already done a crossing and yeah.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Was that the same for you? Did you do the Atlantic crossing as well? Yeah.
I did the Atlantic, but I did it as a team of 4, whereas
Right.
Mims did it solo.
Wow.
So probably quite very different
varied
crossings.
experience.
But yeah, I think just chasing that sense of freedom that you get when you're so far away from civilization and you are just completely on your own, and it does just feel really freeing when you've got the 360-degree view around you of the ocean, and you're so close to the wildlife. It is just so special.
I find it really interesting that, like, for me, that immediately sparks fear. That it's like being out there all on my own in front of the ocean, and there's like such a kind of feeling of positivity from you both about that I think that's really, I don't know, interesting and curious. Why do you think you find so much peace and happiness being out there? Because I think that might seem normal to you, but I don't know if that is for everyone.
Yeah, I guess not everybody's had the opportunity to go out and lose sight of the shore, and maybe they might enjoy it. Maybe they'd hate it. Yeah.
Why do you think it is?
I don't know. I think I had a lot more, I don't know necessarily fear, but nerves before my Atlantic crossing because I didn't know what it was like to lose sight of shore. And then when I got into it, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I don't know whether it's something when I'm doing my ocean rows, I feel like I've got a lot of purpose, even though it means nothing in the grand scheme of things in the world. But I feel a lot of purpose out there, and I do love being in the outdoors, in the nature, and just experiencing things in its like rawest form. I think there's a lot of beauty in that.
And so much so doing it for 165 days as well with one other person. There is one thing about your trip that really shocked me, was that you didn't argue for the whole time or bicker. This is what I've researched. And I find that absolutely wild and crazy. And I'm curious as to know like why you think that might be, that you just got on so well. I find that really incredible.
We were so lucky because, nobody actually believes us that we didn't have that.
Yeah, I mean, we've got no evidence, have we?
We actually didn't. And we'd have disagreements about, we've both been brought up in totally different parts of the world and been brought up in different ways and have different opinions. So we'd always sort of voice our opinion, but it would like never really go further than that. And we always listened to each other, and I think we just communicated quite well. And also, we were just on a massive high, like most of the trip, and we were just really enjoying it, just always giggling and like crying with laughter. And I suppose just really wanted to enjoy the trip as well, and had the same vision.
That's so cool. And you didn't really know each other that well before going into it, did you? That's another thing that I think is really interesting. It's not like you know each other like inside and out. How do you think that relationship actually, did you think it benefited you going in, that you actually kind of had a bit of a blank canvas?
Yeah, I think we probably knew the right things about each other. We knew, like, I knew Jess was really resilient. I knew she wanted to do it for pretty much the same reasons I did. And so maybe it helped because we'd have more things to talk about and more things to learn about each other. And so going into it, I think it was a case of, okay, we're not going to agree on everything, but that's fine, because whoever is going to agree on everything, like Jess says, everyone's going to have different opinions about things. And then just from past experiences, we'd learned a lot about communication and just that it is kind of intentional, and you've got to be self-aware, and knowing that if either of us was either grumpy or a bit short with each other, it's probably because one, we're sleep deprived, and two, we're missing normal food.
Yeah. How would you kind of help people then that might be struggling with communication, or they find themselves getting easily irritated with people, or spending so much time with people? How would you help them in terms of how to collaborate well with people?
I think just take a moment to think, do I really need to say this? Like, or can I just, you know, let it go? Like, a really, like, not make it a big thing, and also just be a better listener, because I think people just don't listen these days, do they? They just want to say what they want to say.
Yeah, that's so true. You spoke clearly about how much you've enjoyed each other's company out there and stuff. What was the biggest emotion, aside from the enjoyment, that you think this experience kind of brought out in you?
That's an easy one.
Oh,
I think like frustration at times, like quiet frustration. Just because we had a really hard time with all of the equipment going wrong on the boat.
Talk us through that. What happened? Tell everyone that's listening that might not know.
Oh, where do we
what
start?
happened.
Go on, you can start the list.
It takes so long to explain. So we'll leave the getting to the start line bit, because we'd be here for about 2 weeks explaining all that.
We've got there. We've got to that. We've made it to the start
we're on
line.
the Rowe, day 6. The rudder totally delaminates.
Right.
And we think, oh, it's fine. We've got the spare rudder. We get that out, try to put it in the rudder housing. That doesn't fit. We're like, okay. Plan C, we've got a dagger board that's interchangeable with the rudder. Spent about 2 days trying to drill into it, snapped and blunted all our drill bits. Turns out the rudders weren't manufactured right, and that's why we had the problems. That's why the first one totally split open, and the second one was sort of expanding. So we had to get rescues and come back to land, and thank God for all our support team making it work. We got back out there and we started having major power issues from the start, which we didn't have on the first attempt. And at first we thought it was just cloud cover. We were convinced the Polynesians navigated by the clouds and not the stars. And then on day, I think, was it 6 or 7 of the restart, our water maker pipe burst. So our water maker is pretty important.
Essential, yeah.
Sent a photo back to the land team, and the water maker expert said something along the lines of, I hate to break it to you, but whoever's installed your water maker has put pipes in that weren't rated for the pressure.
How did you deal with that? Because I think it's one thing as probably like a high performer and a high achiever, that like you're used to kind of doing things yourself and you want things done a certain way, but it could potentially be more frustrating when someone else has made the mistake, not you. How did you deal with it?
I think that was a really hard pill for us to swallow, because the rudders had been manufacturing error, and the water maker and the electrician also was not helpful with solving all those problems.
Your fault
so all these people that are supposed to be professionals and we're supposed to rely on, we'd all been let down in some form. So that, I think we were quite grumpy for a couple of weeks trying to sort all these problems out and trying to manage it. And then I think we just got to the point where one day it was like a switch that flicked. And we're like, we can't change anything about this. No matter how grumpy we are at the situation and frustrated with these people, there's nothing we can do but manage the situation and how we react to it and how we deal with it.
Yeah, that's so true. But how did you manage it? Like, what was the process that you went through to be able to overcome it? Because it's one thing saying, right, let's just get on with it, but what did you actually do?
I think we were always like, there must be a solution. We must be able to fix all of these things. And, you know, we packed loads of spares of bits and bobs, but you just don't know how much to take. And our boat's only just over 9 meters long. But, you know, we get in touch with the support team and they'd contact the specialists and end up, you know, coming up with ideas. We come up with ideas, say, like, ask them, do you think it's going to work? And we did just use absolutely everything on the boat to the point that Mims had to use a pair of her knickers to fix the filter on the emergency water maker.
You sound very resourceful.
We had no choice, didn't we?
Yeah, that's the thing. It probably forced your hand into doing it. Where do you think that kind of resourceful or that kind of like positive, optimistic attitudes come from both of you?
I think in terms of the context of this challenge, because we'd had to fight so hard to get to the start line and we'd literally put everything into it, sort of time, energy and money. There was no way we were ever going to give up or let it defeat us. And we had the goal of getting these records of doing it non-stop and unsupported. And yeah, we could have diverted to an island to get more supplies or get another water maker pipe or get the electrics fixed perhaps, but we'd set ourselves this goal. Yeah. And I think we're both kind of people that when we set ourselves a goal, we want to achieve it. And like, right, well, just break it down, take it one day at a time, literally.
It was really tough, but I think without all of the problems that we had along the way, we wouldn't really have much of a story. I mean, nothing really went wrong on my Atlantic row, and I really wanted to write a book, and I was like, well, there's nothing to write about here.
Well, it sounds like you got plenty to write about now.
Yeah.
So going through that, was that what you expected to happen? Did you kind of go into it thinking, obviously you had this experience where things hadn't gone wrong. Were you kind of expecting things to go wrong along the way, and did they go as wrong as you thought?
I think you prepare for the unexpected to happen, but we didn't expect the amount of problems we had, I think, and sort of the seriousness of the problems.
Right, yeah.
You always expect, I think that's one of the overwhelming things about the pre-departure period is sort of worrying, okay, what is going to happen, because something will break. It's a boat. Something will always go wrong. It's just a matter of what. But I think those kind of 3 major problems, as in rudder/boat damage, water maker issues, power issues, it's a kind of trifecta.
Yeah.
So how did you solve the water in the end? Because that's a pretty essential part of it.
So the pipes weren't actually rated for the pressure. So we tried to make them stronger by wrapping loads of tape around them all, and then also rope. So we're just like binding rope all the way around each pipe, which took like a couple of hours each time the pipe burst. And usually it would burst at the end of each length. So we'd just slice it off and then put it back on.
Again.
But we did get to a point, I think we ended up with having to do 9 repairs, and there was a point that the pipes just weren't reaching anymore. So then we had to start using the emergency hand pumping water maker, which we were having to do for like 6 to 8 hours just to have enough drinking water, and to hydrate our food, and not really enough even to rinse all the salt off us. So we started getting loads of salt sores and became quite uncomfortable.
So that sounds worse than the rowing. Would you agree?
It was definitely first. I think we got to the point where we accepted that we were going to have to hand pump our water at some point.
Yeah.
It was just a prospect from sort of the first week in, knowing that it's going to happen. So we'd had a lot of time to accept it was going to happen. And I got the hand pump out the first day. I was like, Jess, this is actually a lot harder than I expected.
That's not what you want to hear the first
and
time.
I think it was day sort of 95 or something when the water maker guy at home managed to figure out that we could bypass a certain section and therefore just have enough pipe to make it work. And that was just the best day ever, because then we only had to worry about the power.
Yeah, I bet. And that's, even that in itself, aside from the rowing, is a serious amount of like consistency to be able to do that over and over. How were you able to actually be that consistent? Like, I think we spoke about it a little bit off air as well, that like, again, high achievers are kind of used to doing things kind of day in, day out, but this is like all day, every day. That's a serious amount of consistency.
I guess our life kind of depended on it. We
had no choice.
The other sort of backup was, I think we had about 100 litres of plastic water bottles, like for a real emergency if the emergency water maker failed.
Right.
But it was also our ballast water. So that means that if you were to capsize, the boat would self-right and needs the weight in the bottom of the hull to do that. But yeah, I mean, we had nobody to help us but ourselves, and we were so far from civilization, and we didn't know where the nearest boat was that might be able to help us. It could have been 2 weeks away. So.
And what was the physical impact of that as well? Obviously, the pumping the water for that long, did that take away from your rowing quite a fair bit?
Yeah, I mean, it took away from sleep as well, which was really hard. And luckily, we didn't actually have to hand pump our water for that long. It was maybe sort of a week or so, or all in all.
Not that long, only.
But
only a week.
it did finish us off when we managed to figure out this bypass method. We just had such a lag of sleep, and we were like me especially, I feel, was just terrible at getting up for a shift, because especially that last one of the night and waking up, you're only sleeping in sort of an hour and a half burst. And then we were missing that last sleep shift on a night, and sort of starting 2 hours earlier to start on the hand pumping. So when we did manage to have the water maker working again, we were just absolutely floored, I think, weren't we? If we'd have had to do that for the rest of the crossing, it would have been seriously savage.
Do you think that your motivation like waned throughout the trip at all? Obviously, like I say, you got sleep deprivation, you got all these things going wrong. Were you kind of able to maintain a decent level of motivation, or did it ebb and flow a fair bit?
I think we were always stuck to the 2 hours on, 2 hours off routine. And I think you were motivated because otherwise, like, I don't know, if I didn't get up and row, then I'd feel really bad because like the boat's not moving and poor Mims is just also like putting in loads of effort. So I think like working as a team like is a massive part of it.
Yeah. Do you think that like sometimes you didn't want to do it, but you just were able to push through and do it anyway?
I mean, sometimes when your alarm goes off and you're like, oh God, like it's 4 a.m, I've got to get out on shift, but it's sometimes motivation is not going to carry you through. It's got to be the discipline, and it is definitely not easy.
100%.
And there was some days where we were sort of probably weren't very productive nights because we were constantly falling asleep on the oars and not functioning that well.
Yeah, I think also like it's quite difficult because you wanted to be motivated whilst you're on the oars, and I had a habit of falling asleep. Like a lot of ocean rowers hallucinate, and I just didn't. I would just pass out and hit the deck before that actually started happening. And I think it was just really frustrating because I really wanted to row, and like it would be a beautiful starry night, you know, rowing under the Milky Way, and you know, maybe like not so bad conditions, you're not getting soaked, but then that makes it harder to stay awake.
Yeah, because then you're like, it's so peaceful.
Yeah.
So what was the worst conditions that you faced out there, the toughest parts, aside from obviously the challenges with the boat itself, just purely the conditions?
Yeah, I mean, we never had any storms, which we thought was quite crazy over that amount of time and that distance. But we did have a lot of beamy conditions, so quite side on. Okay. And sometimes we'd have sort of over 20 knot winds and sort of 4 or 5 metre waves maybe just hitting us sideways, which was super frustrating because if it was on our stern, we'd be absolutely flying and going so fast and it'd be helping us push on. But instead we were just getting the waves breaking over us. And so I think that was quite hard to deal with and quite relentless because we got a lot of salt sores. Yeah. My salopettes turn out to not be very waterproof. So especially at night, you're just getting, I could just feel the water seeping through, and then it's like sandpaper, just having that friction, that layer. And so that was always quite hard to deal with because you're just can't clear out the salt sores until it either gets calmer or you get more favourable wind or a sunnier day. What
kind of percentage would you say then of like discomfort versus comfort do you think you had over the whole time?
Oh gosh. I mean, ocean rowing's definitely quite uncomfortable. I think just being salty the whole time, and like also with the water maker issues, we weren't able to rinse ourselves that much. So what percentage? I mean, some days are more uncomfortable than others. I suppose maybe after you've had a proper bucket wash and a hair wash, you'd feel really comfortable for the day.
Yeah.
And then it would just go back to, I don't know.
Yeah.
6 out of 10
struggling.
Uncomfortable, yeah.
How do you think you dealt with then, I guess, like being happy with that discomfort and being okay with it and managing to push through? Because I think that's something that is a really kind of key message, I think, to others, that it's not things, if you're trying to achieve really difficult things, the likelihood is you're not going to be comfortable, and you are probably like the epitome of that. Like you've literally lived it and breathed it, so you're probably the best people to ask that question, I guess.
Yeah, I think it is hard to deal with, and some days we definitely dealt with it better than others. I think you've got to kind of learn to love that aspect of it. Yeah. So trying to reframe it in a way that's different and be like, right, we're stripped back here. How cool is this to be, you know, have so little and get so much from this experience? Something that I had written up in the cabin of my Atlantic boat, but also Velocity for the Pacific, was the difference between an ordeal and an experience is your attitude. So just trying to remind yourself in that moment that, you know, it can be really horrible, you can let it be really horrible, but also you can find the good in these moments. Having said that is easier said than done.
That's what's my next question was going to be. That's easier said than done. How did you actually manage that, I guess? Did you have kind of processes going into it that you kind of said, if I feel this way, I'm going to act like this, or is it very much vibe and assess as we go along?
Yeah, it was weird because I felt like we both felt like this, like quite a similar mood at the same time.
Okay.
So at the beginning, when everything was going wrong, we were both really quiet and we didn't really speak to each other. I think we were just listening to audiobooks. But there was a day that it just clicked and we realised that, you know, it doesn't need to be this bad. And, you know, we started chatting more and listening to music on the speaker together and singing and just like really enjoying it. And it is funny, I think definitely like each other's mood has an impact
Yeah. What impact did each of you have on each other in terms of like the biggest effect you had on each other out there?
I think the nice thing about sharing it, which obviously I didn't have on my Atlantic crossing, was that when things went wrong, we could keep each other level. Like, because Jess is so calm in situations, it helps me be calmer in situations, and we both just jump into action. So I think that was fantastic. None of us are panickers, which I think if one of us was very sort of I can't think what the word is, but it's the end of the world and this has gone so wrong and it's an absolute disaster, then I think it would have started to have a knock-on effect on each other. Because we're both quite solution orientated. I think that's what helped and what worked so well.
Yeah, did you kind of know that about each other going into it, or was it very much a find out as you went along?
I guess like we knew a bit, but like we'd only done so much rowing on the boat together. And you are in like a totally different environment. I mean, we were mostly just like on the phone talking about campaign stuff. So I knew a bit, but
that is probably the thing that impresses me the most as well, that you didn't know each other that well and you dived head first into it. If there was people listening now that are thinking about taking on a big challenge like this, what would you say to them?
I think that there's never a right time. Everybody's waiting for the right time. You know, there's not enough hours in the day. Or, you know, they're not as fit as they'd like to be. I think once you say yes and start preparing, I think that is just the first step.
Yeah, I think echo that. Say yes now, figure out how later. Like Jess says, nobody, I think both my rows, I wish I'd known more about certain things before, but I don't think you're ever going to feel ready for a big thing like that. And also, I think just that some people won't get the vision and that's fine, but as long as you remember why you're doing it and use that in the moments when it does get really hard and you're thinking, oh God, is it going to be worth all this work and all this hassle? And that'll help get you through as well.
So when you were getting to the end of your journey, did you know what it was going to feel like at the end, and did it feel like exactly what you expected it to?
So the last day was quite interesting. We thought we were going to arrive in the morning and, you know, it wasn't too windy. We thought, oh, it's going to be quite a nice ride in. And we knew our parents were coming out on little boats to see us as well. And I think we thought it might be a bit more relaxing and that we might have more time to sort of think about the whole trip and sort of have that quiet moment to sort of realise what you've achieved. But we had 20 knot headwinds and we were both just rowing as hard as we possibly could. And I think we didn't really say much to each other that day, but all that was going through our head was, oh my gosh, we're possibly going to run aground, hit the bottom and have to swim ashore with all the sharks and crocodiles and, you know, or potentially have to get a tow in and lose all of our records. I think we just had a bit of a battle on the last day. Yeah.
Tell us about that then, because I don't think that's something that's pretty well known. I guess what actually happened then on the last day. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so we had to get through the Great Barrier Reef the night before, which we were quite worried about because of the lack of power and not being able to have our chart plotter on to see our route. But we managed to get through fine. And the following morning, the wind just started picking up loads and it was quite hard sort of getting around the headlands. And our family actually managed to wangle a free helicopter trip and they were doing loops above us and so it was really cool to see them. It was a bit of a surprise. And then we basically just spent a really long time not rowing very far, almost like just staying in the same spot nearly. And we got told that we needed to stay 5 meters inside the channel markers because that's where it's dredged and deep enough for us to go. And we were literally just drifting like outside the channel. We were about 5 meters outside of it. And we just had no control of the boat. And we were both rowing as hard as we possibly could. And we couldn't even take our hands off the oars to radio and say, we're in a bit of a pickle here because we had to just keep rowing.
So you actually had almost
we
the
could
hardest
see
bit.
the marina.
Yeah, and you're right at the end.
It was like doing like a sprint, but just for the whole day.
And I don't think we've ever rowed as hard in our entire lives. And I think it just in that moment felt absolutely heartbreaking because of all the problems just getting to the start line, getting the boat through customs, like all the power issues, all the water maker issues, getting through all that, and
You're so close.
with the goal of having these records in mind, and then potentially losing it all in the last 2 miles when we had already travelled over 8,000. We were like, this cannot be happening.
That's a pretty significant thing to deal with. How, in that moment, what were you saying to each other? Like, if we could be with you right there, what were you saying to each other? Or were you not?
We didn't say anything to each other. I think we were both feeling a bit defeated inside, and just like so many things were going through our head. Like, you know, what can we do? Like, do we throw the anchor out? And, you know, we were told that the anchor wouldn't hold around there because it was just sludgy and we'd probably just end up drifting anyway. But I think we were just trying to find a solution.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like you're still that kind of solution
to get there,
led.
but like both in our own heads.
Yeah,
not
there was
to each
nothing.
other.
There was nothing that we could do other than keep going. There was
Right.
no quick fix. There was no cheat code
Just
to
pure
it.
hard work.
We said we've just got to keep going. Just hopefully it changes. Hopefully it gets better. And once the photographer and the guy from the yacht club came out on a rib, and they were like, there is clear water ahead. They were like, it's maybe 300 strokes. And they were like, just keep going.
And you mentioned about sharks and crocodiles. Was that a genuine, real threat for you around that time?
Well, yeah, because we were around Cairns in Australia, and yeah, there's quite a lot of wildlife in the water around there. And
how did that
nobody really swims.
affect what you were doing, or were you locked in at that point?
I think at that point it meant that if we did run aground, then we couldn't really swim ashore with the sharks and the crocodiles. We did have the conversation, do we risk it? Like, how bad is it?
I think the optimism might have been
I think
too far
that was desperation that moment.
Yeah.
But when we got close to the Great Barrier Reef, we needed to get in and clean the hull of the boat again, because you get a lot of barnacles and a lot of growth that builds up and really slows you down. And so there was a thought of timing the last hull clean, because we didn't want to be too close to any reefs for sharks and stuff like that. But it wasn't too much of an issue, really. It didn't affect us too much.
So was there a point then when you both went, we've done this now, we're over this hard part, or was it literally right down to the wire?
It literally felt like, because there was a point that we finally did get into like an area where the wind wasn't blowing so much, and we were just approaching the marina, and the sun had already set, so it was getting dark. And I just remember, so we ended up being able to just have one person rowing. So Mims was rowing and I was steering, and even just trying to get into the marina, the tide was pushing us that way, and I was like, God, you still got to go like row really hard, otherwise we're going to go back out. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't until we put the anchor up when we got into the marina and lit the flares, and yeah, and I think when we saw family standing on the dock as well and cheering us in, that was.
And what was that feeling like when you finished, you completed it, you've done what you wanted to achieve? What was that feeling like?
I think it was just really weird, because it'd been a goal that we'd had for so long and worked so hard for. And on the crossing as well, you try, especially for this length of one compared to our Atlantic crossings, it was nearly 3 times longer. So you try not to think of the finish, because it is such
Still
a long
so
point
far.
away, and you try and just take it literally one day at a time.
Yeah.
And each day is like just a new chapter. And so like, God, like we're here. I mean, it felt like only yesterday we'd set off from Peru, and yeah, everything that we got through. So it just felt really, really strange.
I think a lot of people can probably relate to that especially events that have taken so long to do. Do you think it is worth then for listeners that are following along really enjoying like the process over like kind of searching just for the outcome right at the end? How important would you say that is?
Yeah, I think it's so important, and it is definitely really tough, but I feel like we've both learned so much along the way, because we've, done loads of different things that you wouldn't do. I mean, it's like starting a business almost. Yeah.
Well, I know all about that. It's difficult, and I think a big thing that stood out for me is how many challenges you've had along the way, and whether they're small or big. Do you have advice for people, listen, when you're facing those so many challenges, how to approach it effectively? What would you say?
Oh, I think it's really tricky. I think a part of it's breaking it down and trying not to let it overwhelm you too much. And all of these challenges do, I think, like when we had the water maker pipe, the bursting, the first issue was, first thought you go to is, oh my God, we're going to have to hand pump all our water. And then it was breaking it down and thinking, right, before we get to that step, what can we do to prolong that coming as much as possible? So it's like, right, we've just got to try and make this repair every time. and figure out how to optimize that.
Were you able to kind of detract your emotion from things? It sounds like you're both we spoke about you being solution focused, but you are dealing with like quite significant things, quite significant emotions of frustration, like annoyance. Like I said, you've relied on these people and they've let you down. Were you able to separate that in the moment and to just do what you need
I
to do?
I don't think I really felt like that angry. I think I was more just like frustrated, but like quietly so.
Yeah.
I'm sort of, I don't really show my emotions that much. I like keep everything inside and stay a bit more quiet, and I guess try and like solve things in my head first.
Do you think that's a big strength of Jess's?
Yeah, I think so. 'Cause she's so calm, but I think we're both a little bit like that.
Yeah.
So sometimes it can be hard to tell how the other's feeling, but I think it gets to a point of acceptance. I think I was definitely more angry about the situation, but Jess would help calm me, and I think it's just getting to that point of acceptance and just like, this is how it is. And we just started getting to the point where we weren't surprised when things went wrong, and
We just have a joke about it. We just laugh.
well, of course that's
make us
happened.
broken.
And,
Oh, how funny.
Do you think that's important to use humour as a bit of a tool? To get through?
It's the only way to get through it. But we would start messaging our safety officer and be like, guess what? Then he'd be like, stop asking.
Make them guess.
He'd be like, gals, stop that.
So do you think overall the challenge has changed you both as people, or is it just kind of cemented what you knew about yourselves anyway?
I think, it just shows that you can be like quite resilient and determined when everything is going wrong. But definitely did learn that. Yeah.
Is that the same for you?
I think so. I think we definitely learned that we can go through a lot of stuff. I think more capacity for things going wrong than we realised, because when you're in that situation, you've got no choice but to get through it. There's no sort of shop or person to turn to or whatever. So I think, definitely cemented a lot that we maybe know about ourselves, but also realised how much we're actually capable of.
Yeah. Do you think in general people, we do underestimate what we can achieve?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I know it sounds crazy, but I think anybody can row across an ocean if they really, really want to, and they're determined enough to do it.
See, I think so many people would think that is unachievable.
Yeah.
And I think you're probably both very humble in that your mindset, I think, to be able to be that consistent is so impressive. Now, you can do it. The question is, will you do it again, or will you do another thing similar? It sounds like you both don't want to just sit still and do nothing.
We had a lot of time to talk about adventures.
Yeah.
Definitely would love to do another row. There's obviously the Indian Ocean out there that will get ticked off eventually. Also love the idea of learning something totally new and sort of putting myself out of the comfort zone in that way. I mean, right now we're busy sort of working on the book and still sort of paying off the rest of the expedition costs. So it's kind of, and also
That's
just
the focus at the minute.
Yeah, and also it's so exhausting planning on these things. It is nice to have a bit of free time, but I think the right adventure will come to us. With both ocean rows, I found that they've just absolutely grabbed me and I've become totally obsessed. So I'm hoping the right thing will come along and it'll be obvious what the right next adventure
rather than
is.
searching for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you both need a good rest for at least a year. Thank you so much for sharing your tale on here, and I wish you all the very best for your next adventures, whatever does come next.
Thank you so
for
much.
having us.